Perfect. Okay. So as the flyer and the invitation indicates, and also the title here, the first half of this workshop is basically we're going to be discussing how to establish routines, the importance, and also how setting limits is equally important to this whole process when dealing and managing children's needs and growth as parents come across many different challenges and many different approaches. If I could ask everyone to please mute your phones or your laptops. And I'm going to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Gloria Echeverria, and I'm one of the mental health specialists here at Alliance for Community Empowerment. We have with us my mental health manager, Ms. Dawn Pearson, Ms. Edie, who is our TLCC manager, and we actually have one of our staff also with us, Ms. Lisa. And we also have our other mental health specialist, Ms. Christine Logan.
I just want to find out quick, Laurie, before you start. Does everyone know who their mental health specialist is for their site? Are the parents aware? Every site has an assigned mental health specialist. If you have any concerns or you need more help with things like this. So if you want to write in the chat or you want to just say something now, if you aren't sure who that person is, we can let you know who that is, because every site does have that assigned person. And then also, does everyone know how to use the chat feature? If you're not comfortable speaking or you have a question, you can stop Gloria. I'll be monitoring the chat if you wanted to put anything in the chat, if you had any questions. Okay.
So I wanted to start off with the 4 main areas that I'm going to be covering while we discuss what establishing routines looks like and why is this so highly important. So we're going to be dealing with, again, the importance. What is gained when you establish routines, and what are the typical 5 types of routines? And then I ended this portion of the presentation with a sample of what a daily schedule looks like. And once we get to this point, I'm going to open it up for further conversation and questions. And of course, throughout the presentation, if you want to interject, as Ms. Dawn said, or you have any particular questions, or even if you have a personal anecdote or example that you would like to share, and or even let us know whether or not you have had any experiences with establishing any kind of routines, and whether or not how that process went for you. Was it an easy process? Was it a challenging process? And where exactly you learned what techniques work best for your child. So one of the reasons why routines are so important, and this is more so for children, but this is actually a very applicable truth to many adults. So this is not only for children. We begin the process of establishing these skills because then later on you just master them the more practice that you get. So children thrive on routines because it gives them a sense of control in their environment. It helps them feel safe, secure, and comfortable. And it also gives them an idea of what's coming next, which can reduce significantly a lot of fear and anxiety that comes with not knowing what to expect next. They also know how to prepare and actually take control of an activity or a task. It engages them in how they are learning and how they're processing information. And it also helps children develop positive behaviors with the most basic things of life, which is eating, sleeping, active and quiet play, time alone, and time with other children and other social settings. So when we do see a breakdown in any one of these areas, we do start to wonder how solidified and how comfortable the child is with the set routines. So we do understand that routines change and do change according to the child's needs and the child's ability to comprehend what is being asked of them, and also as they grow. The routine that worked when they were 2 is not going to be the same routine that's going to work when they're 9, because they have different needs and they have different perspectives and different understandings. So one of the main types of routines is the daily routines, things that we as adults do typically on auto, we get up, we brush our teeth, we use the bathroom, we take care of our necessities. These kinds of things we as adults tend to believe or sometimes think that they're a second nature, that you are just automatically aware of that process. Children are constantly asking and learning from their environment. So when they do not have a set routine for their daily needs, it tends to disrupt their understanding of what is going to come next. So if a child does not have a specific routine for getting up and coming to school, we can actually see some of those behaviors when the child is already in school and not wanting or having a difficult time adjusting to the routines in the classroom. So and you guys probably have heard a lot of mental health professionals and even neurologists and sleep specialists that say that two of the most critical times for daily routines are for morning routines and for sleep routines. You can be a little more flexible in the middle of the day, but how you start your day and how you end your day plays a critical role as to how you feel, how you interact, and how easily you can actually address or even take on any surprises, any challenges, which life is always full of. Because as much as we want to be predictable and have control, we have to give room to life to surprise us. And children often get excited, irritable, or scared when changes happen rapidly, which is why having routines and having adults in their life that can give them that sense of stability and that sense of uh, basically ease with how they go from one activity to the next, it actually prepares them for not falling apart or not necessarily giving in to certain negative emotions when in fact challenges and disruptions happen. So it's basically any kind of consistent activity that you do that can be, again, it can be as specific as you need it or as general based on your child's needs and based on what exactly you are looking to actually have them learn. So if your child is very cranky in the morning because they're not necessarily a morning person, you are now seeing that they're giving you a hard time getting up in the morning, starting off their day, even with simple things like, can you please get up and choose your outfit, or please brush your teeth, or come on, let's have something to eat before I take you to school. And your child is simply stuck on, well, you just woke me up and I'm still sleepy and I don't want to do this. Those are the times where you would use that opportunity as a learning opportunity to say, you know what, I think I need to establish a routine for my child that works better in the morning. And usually for children, once they're able to talk and able to communicate, once they're 4 or 5, typically they have a lot of language at that point, they can actually get very involved and they can help you develop these daily routines. Because the more involved and the more empowered they are, the more likely it is to follow. And of course, once you set a daily routine, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work every day. But the more consistent and the more repetition and the more stability there is in following through with that routine, the more likelihood that the child will just simply follow. So daily routines are critical to start as early as possible. This is not something that most mental health professionals will tell you. The earlier you start, even at months old, the easier it is to continue to build upon these daily routines, because the child is going to not only follow your lead, but the child is also going to learn that these routines are helpful for their own understanding. So it becomes a working relationship for both. The child has a better understanding of what is happening, and the parent has to do less talking, less repeating, and hopefully less yelling. Then we have transition routines. And these routines are typically very challenging for our children of various ages, in particular those who have special needs. Very much so because it is if you can think of a child who has a speech delay, for instance, does not have the ability to tell mom, I want X, Y, and Z. And now the parent is asking the child to stop an activity that they like to go into an activity that is necessary at that moment. Now the child has no way of telling you, no, I do not want to do that. This is not what I feel comfortable with. So most children who have no words for how they're feeling, they're going to show you with their behavior what they're having a difficult time with. So we do see a lot of our children with special needs. And this is not only for children with special needs. This applies to children of any typical category. Most children, especially toddlers, and I think some of us adults can agree with this too, we would prefer if all of our activities were the activities that we love and have fun with. But we do have activities throughout our lives and throughout our days that are not necessarily fun, quote unquote, but they're necessary to whatever our set goal is. So a child, for example, who's playing with their favorite toy and it's now time to eat dinner and their dinner plate has vegetables, that's not one of their favorite things to eat. And they're not necessarily too hungry at that moment, even though you have the routine of, hey, this is our dinner time. This is what we do during this time of the day. The child may still give you some challenges with transition simply because you're going from an activity that they like to an activity that they don't necessarily prefer. And so these types of transitions are critical for any parent who has special needs. And I'm not going to get too much into it now, but this in particular is the areas that I and our disability specialists work hand in hand with to help the children that are at our center, that are diagnosed and are showing signs of having some difficulties with transitions. And we do provide strategies. If we do provide strategies in classroom, the whole model of Head Start is to bridge the home school connection. So if you do have a mental health specialist or a disability specialist that has spoken to you about transition routines, it will be very good for you to follow up and ask for transitional techniques and strategies and what these transitional strategies look like. Because again, because although we're dealing with the topic of establishing routines and set schedules are very personalized, because what works for one child is not going to work for another, despite the fact that they may be struggling with the exact same issue. We're all individuals, and how the approach is made has to be individualized for that child. So we do provide strategies. We do provide a lot of techniques. And one of the ones that we typically use in our classroom is we do a lot of visuals and we do a lot of audio warnings, especially to prepare the child before the transition takes place. And the reason for that is, again, if you allow the child to know what's the next coming step without it being a quick change, they're likely to follow easier with that change rather than having an abrupt change where you have to say, of course, in times of emergency, that goes completely out the window because emergencies are emergencies. But during a typical day, going from one typical activity to the next, if the child has an idea of, they don't have very rarely a concept of time, but if you can say to them, I'm going to give you, I just rang the bell. When I ring the bell the second time, that is the time when we start officially cleaning up and preparing for the next step. And when I ring the bell the third time, we are already starting the next activity. Because it's going to be audio and it's something that the child is receiving help from you, 9 times out of 10, they will actually comply. And of course, this is not to say that, again, it doesn't necessarily work 100% of the time, and it doesn't necessarily work with all children, but statistically proven that when you do have transition routines coupled with daily routines, and it's clear and it's at the language that the child understands, and you're giving them what most children respond to, which is a lot of visual stimulation. So if you give them a picture rather than using too many words, or if you're using words, you keep it very simple. The children, then not only are you giving them language so that they understand how to work with these situations, but you're also helping them understand that this is happening with them, not necessarily to them. And so again, it alleviates a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of defiancy. Because if they know ahead of time and you have a conversation while you're developing these routines, 9 times out of 10, the child is not going to be surprised, because you can always say, remember we talked about? And with our children with special needs, a lot of that is a little more challenging, simply because you have a lot of other restrictions and a lot of other limitations. But again, with children with special needs, we do have specific strategies and techniques that any one of us, mental health and disabilities, could definitely be of help to any parent that's interested in that. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Nope. Okay, I move on. The third type of routine is social routines.
I'm sorry, Glory.
Yes.
I was on mute, but Brittany has a question.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yes, it's okay, Ms. Edie. Thank you.
Can you hear?
Now, let's say can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, now let's just say we do have a sudden change in the keeping routines. Is there anything else on top of that we can do just to help them ease into the process? Like, let's say it's a sudden move and you didn't have the opportunity to ease into that.
I'm trying to, I couldn't hear the last part of your question. You said, are there any other strategies and techniques other than routines?
Yes, other than maintaining the routine to your best of your ability, is there anything else we can do to help them transition to that sudden change?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes, yes. There are many other strategies and techniques. One of the foundations that we use is the routines, because this is going to set the ground for what is expected. So when you do establish routines, you are going to then be able to see what is working, and that is going to be the direction that's going to follow, that's going basically to lead you to the next question, which is, oh, my child has a really difficult time with the transition routines that I put in place. He or she is having a really hard time understanding what my expectations are. Then we have to simplify the approach so that the child is able to understand. And then we also have to, like I said, all of these strategies are very personalized. So for your particular child, that will be a question that basically we're going to discuss, not only how they're responding to the transition and the challenges, but then we also have to have a conversation about their level of understanding, their level of language, their possible distractions, because again, when we're dealing with children, and especially children with special needs, we got to take into account that their environment and the moment has a lot of say in what they are doing with their bodies and in response to their environment. So if they are in a very chaotic environment and you are trying to give them structure without addressing the chaos in that environment, 9 times out of 10, that's not going to work. So we do have to have multiple steps. So a lot of the times when establishing routines for children, we first work with establishing routines for the parents. Because if the parent is not aware of what works for the parent, then you're going to get frustrated if you put in place a routine that you yourself cannot follow. And then, of course, it's going to be even more challenging for the parent to be consistent in holding that routine, because the parent hasn't necessarily found that routine to be helpful. So it really is a conversation, a really detailed conversation about what the behaviors are, what are the expectations, what do we actually have in place that does work, and then building from that point.
Also, I just want to say, Gloria, too, this is why I just wanted to make sure everyone knew who their mental health specialist is at their site, because that specialist can help you come up with the routine and things. And one of the things I was thinking about as far as additional strategies is something simple like positive reinforcement. So let's say you're in the morning, you're trying to do potty training, for example. Like a popular thing is to like give an M&M or to give some kind of little reward for potty training. So within that transition, you can say, let's look and see what's next. Now we're going to do this. And if your child does it, you can give them praise, or you can give them where it's appropriate. We don't always like to reward with food, but it is a popular thing to do things like give one M&M every time they use the potty. So positive reinforcement is kind of letting them know, I love how you follow the schedule for today. I love how you got ready today. I love how, or something, maybe at the end of the week, they can earn a prize. So we can always add. So like Gloria was saying, the routine is the kind of the foundation, setting that up so that your day is a little bit easier. And then within that, using something like a reward or positive reinforcement or hugs or whatever it is to kind of solidify that routine. And like she said, you may realize your child might need visuals, right? Maybe some kids are really visual and you might want to have something on your fridge so they can follow. My daughter she has ADHD, and we have something every morning. She has like a little whiteboard. We have everything written on there and she crosses it off. So we have a routine, but we still needed to implement other things like positive rewards and having a system where she could cross it off. So again, your specialist can help you, kind of tailor it to your child.
Yes.
Okay, I think Brittany, you want to say something?
Oh, no, just saying thank you. Thank you. I appreciate
You're
appreciate
welcome.
the information.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay. And then I added rituals here at the end because when I was preparing for this meeting, I realized that although we have the three typical, the daily, the transitional, and the social routines, the rituals that a family has, and those can be holiday rituals, birthday rituals, religious rituals. This, and I can speak on behalf of myself, my family has a many specific traditions and rituals that we have surrounding major holidays, birthdays, or events. And I can honestly remember as a child feeling incredibly special and feeling incredibly connected to not only my family and my siblings, but also with the idea of what that ritual meant to me, because it really gave me a sense of belonging and it gave me a sense of connection. And it also allowed me to have that connection with my family so that when I was spending time with my family, regardless of the circumstance, even that time that I was spending with my family became a ritual in itself. So this is basically anything that you do that includes either immediate family members, long distance family members, or even friends that have become like family, that when you do introduce the activity to the child, let's say for, in my family, when we see each other, regardless of whether or not is a long distance cousin or an aunt or even a longtime friend, we kiss on the cheek. We don't hug, but we kiss on the cheek. And that ritual is the invitation for, hello, I miss you. It encompasses so much understanding with just that one kiss. Or when I see my aunts and uncles, I do ask for their blessing. And it's something very common for my culture. We ask for the blessing and then your family members bless you. And it's not only a form of connection, it is also a form of respect. And it's also a form of honoring what that role, that particular family's role is in my life. So for us Hispanics, we make a distinction in Spanish between the formal you and the informal you. So again, rituals are giving children a very, very positive outcome in terms of how they perceive themselves in that family.
Let this thing be steady. Let it be steady.
Can I ask you to please mute yourself? Thank you. So as I put here, the bottom line is that regardless of whatever routines you do put in place, it is always going to be, you're always going to come across unknowns, and you're always going to come across areas that you can elaborate and expand upon. The one thing that I would like you to take away from why routines are so important is that at the end of the day, you are also learning with your child as your child is learning from you. So parenting doesn't come with a handbook, as we all know. And so there's nothing that I can say, oh, this is going to work 100% of the time, all the time with your child. That unfortunately, that's not the way human beings work. So, but once you have these specific strategies, which we not only know through statistics, but also through active application, they actually do work. But it does take practice, and it does take consistency, and it does take support. This is not something that you are expected to do alone, which is why we do encourage you to ask your mental health specialist for a breakdown of anything that you are utilizing at home or even in your own routines. And if you are actually already have an idea and you have your routines set in place and they seem to be working great, then by all means, continue that. And then as you see your child grow and the demands become different, then you adjust them. But the whole point of these strategies, in particular to routines, is to alleviate a great majority of stress and challenges that can come as a result of toddlers' behaviors when in fact they're not aware of what is expected of them. Because remember, we are dealing with our little ones who are still, language is still part of their growth. Although they may have a lot of language, they may not necessarily have a lot of emotional language or a lot of descriptive language. They may also not necessarily understand their place in what exactly you are requiring of them. So we bring them to school and we automatically assume that they're supposed to understand, oh, you came to school and this is where you learn, and there are people here and there's teachers here who are going to love you and they're going to teach you. That's not automatically a given. It is a change. And if it is a rapid change, it can actually be very scary. So the more established routines you have, your sense of structure and order to the day becomes a little clearer. And that not only helps the parent, but it significantly helps the child. Any questions, comments? And I ended it here. And this is actually something that I only put this in as a sample because, again, like I said, this is what we would typically look at as a typical daily schedule that a parent could have with their child. And as you can see, it's broken down into 45 minutes to half an hour intervals, because we do understand that when you are creating a routine, the smoother each activity goes with the next, without too much of a gap in between, the easier it is for the child to actually understand what is expected. So even if let's say, for instance, the gap between 8 a.m. getting dressed and the morning snack, if getting dressed and brushing teeth is going to take a little longer than half an hour, because you do have that flexibility, you actually want to break that down for the child. So getting dressed, brushing teeth means, and now you can get even more specific. You get to choose your outfit. You get to choose which toothbrush or which toothpaste you like today. Or you get to choose which order you want to do it. Do you want to brush your teeth first and then get dressed, or vice versa? So this is always something that can be adjusted to to whatever the child and the parent's household really needs. And again, the daily routines that we follow in the classroom is definitely something, when we do implement the strategies, that we do want to share with the parents, because as much as you are aware of what we are doing in the classroom, then you can also step in and not only help us better modify whatever strategies we're using, but it also gives the child the consistency, because now they're not just getting it in school, they're also getting it from home. And now we become a complete cohesive team, and the child sees us all as parents. And the job, obviously, the whole point of these techniques and strategies is to assist in the parenting process, because we do understand, I know for sure, it's one of the toughest jobs. It's actually, in my opinion, the toughest job anyone can take on, but it's actually, I don't think there's anything more rewarding than being a parent. Anyone has any questions or comments? So I'm gonna move on to setting limits. And this goes hand in hand with our daily routine conversation, because the actual setting limits comes as a result of what you will observe while you're creating those routines. So when a parent is actually looking to set limits, and we can add, I've also included limits, and I put it as / boundaries. The reason why we are usually giving our children boundaries and limits is because, again, we want them to feel safe and secure in their understanding of what their role is in whatever activity is happening. You are also teaching them that you have areas and strategies that you can help them with when they are not necessarily understanding what is expected of them. And then rules also teach our children self-discipline, which goes hand in hand with the ability to calm down, the ability to adjust to change, the ability to make choices, the ability to understand when and how they are behaving. And then in general, we basically, life in itself consists of boundaries, limits, and then the freedom of choice that we have to do our different activities. So this is one of the very reasons why setting limits, and I know it can be a little challenging for some parents, because the struggle is, if you're setting limits and you're setting boundaries, you could also be causing your child some upsetting emotions. They become upset, they become a little defiant, they may even have a full-blown tantrum. And there are feelings that the parent is dealing with as a result of that. But again, if those boundaries and limits are not set due to what is expected, depending on what the circumstances are, then the behaviors that you are experiencing can escalate and can become extremely difficult to deal with, which again only adds to the stress and the challenges that comes with parenting. One of the basic ways that I usually speak to the parents about setting limits is I always ask them to check in first while they're observing the behavior with themselves. And what I mean by this is that, of course, if your child is not in a dangerous emergency situation, there's time for you to actually observe the behavior before you respond to it. So the first important thing is, what might be driving this behavior? What happened that my child is now responding this way? And then you have to also go into, what's your understanding of, I don't know what just happened. Sorry about that. You also want to keep in mind where your child is in terms of their development. If your child has very little words and they're having a behavior, talking to them may not necessarily be the best approach to help them understand what you are asking of them, which is where, like Ms. Dawn mentioned, we do have other strategies, visuals, audio, that could in fact be very helpful at that point. But that's not to say that the boundary and the limit is not to be put in place. Because again, what you are mainly doing by setting limits and boundaries is you're teaching your child how to understand what is expected, what is not expected, and possible consequences of those behaviors. And then not only that, is they are also, the whole goal of this is to minimize any negative experiences, any negative emotional experiences. There isn't a parent that I know that wants to wake up and have their child have a tantrum simply because you told them they can't have a donut for breakfast, because in your parenting, that's not what you would prefer to feed your child in the morning. you would like to be able to tell your child, well, we're going to have this type of breakfast, and your child flow, because that makes it easier. That makes the day flow easier. But when we're having a sort of reaction, children are going to let you know what they understand and what they're not okay with. And that's perfectly okay. They're entitled to have their opinion. They're entitled to actually not only have their opinion, but they should be able to share with you in any way, be it behavior or verbally, what exactly they want and why they want it. But you have to also understand that your reaction to their behavior is critical to how your child is going to respond in your attempt to actually not only set the limit, but actually help themselves soothe. And then the last one I always ask is, does your child really need you to resolve this problem for them? Or is this something that you can, despite the fact that they're yelling, despite the fact that they're screaming, or despite the fact that they have now dropped on the floor, they're having a full-blown tantrum because they don't want to comply? Is that a moment where you can say, you know what, I need to step in and explain it a little further? Or should I allow them to try to figure this out on their own? And it is a very tough situation for parents, mostly, again, because there are other emotions that come up for a parent when you see your child crying. There isn't a parent alive that wants to see their child crying or hurt. But there are healthy cries, and then there are emergency crying. So it's being able to check in. And of course, the more you practice this, the easier it becomes when the behaviors are actually coming forth. And again, your response to how the child is behaving is critical to what it is to the outcome. So if a child happens to, let's say, for instance, you don't particularly want them to drink at a white couch in the living room. You don't want any messy, sticky foods on there, and you've told them repeatedly, please do not do that. I don't want it. And here is your child doing exactly that. They look at you and they're opening the candy, and they got the chocolate, and you can see the fingers, and you can already imagine how the sofa is going to look with all of the markings on it. Your child is going to respond to that moment however you choose to respond to their behavior. So if you go from 0 to 10, no, I told you not to do it. 9 times out of 10, now you have actually encouraged them to do similar behaviors because your reaction was very exaggerated. And children tend to observe those behaviors from adults. And to them, it can be perceived many, many ways, but mostly they actually believe this is pretty funny and pretty fun. So the more reaction they have out of us, it seems to be that they really like those reactions. And so a lot of the times you will see parents go, oh my God, no matter how much I say, please stop doing this, does it repeatedly, and just because they're getting a certain reaction and they're getting a certain level of attention from you that they have correlated that behavior with. So staying calm and being mindful of how important that particular behavior is in the moment is critical to, again, your approach. Are you going to be able to speak to them in a calm voice? Are you going to be able to speak to them at their level? Are you going to be able to utilize some of the breakdowns and actually help your child understand, rather than, I've asked you not to do this? Then you're having, and again, I go back to saying that all of this limit settings and routines work when the parent is already aware of what works for them first. So it has to come through practice. If you are able to work on how you respond to yourself and to your environment when something does not go your way, then 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a lot easier for you to utilize that same approach with your child. And of course, we're humans, we're not perfect. You're going to have moments where you're not connected, when you are not in the mood, when you have had a horrible day, and your go-to reaction is going to be possibly yelling, possibly an immediate limit setting, or possibly a response to with words that you will later on say, that wasn't the best approach. The most important thing is to not get stuck on that particular quote unquote mistake, is to learn from it. It's simply, you know what, I can do a better job at that. What can I do better? And if you don't have the strategies, or if you feel nothing that you are doing is working, that's where us mental health professionals and other behavioral professionals come into play. Because you have your pediatricians, you have mental health, you have an array of different resources available to you, at least when your child is enrolled with us, where you should not feel that you do not have anyone that you can approach with these kinds of challenges and issues. So I do come across many parents. They come with a notebook and they show me, I've done all of this. And Gloria, this is so hard. My child is looking at me with a little smirk. And this is the 1,500th time that they've done the same thing. And they know that really irks my nerves and that's not allowed. What do I do? And that's where we get very specific and very detailed with our strategies and techniques that we offer to the parents. Don't I see your hand is up?
Yeah. So I just wanted to, I'm noticing it's 11:25. I just want to check in with our parents. I know we started a few minutes late. Is everyone able to stay on maybe 5 or 10 extra minutes? And just so you know, this is going to be, we're going to post the PowerPoint and the video of this. So if you do miss something and you need to get off, you'll be able to get that at a later time. I know we want to kind of tie this into parental self-care. Gloria's kind of part of what you want to do with these setting limits and having a schedule is to kind of make your day less stressful, right? And that is part of self-care. So is there anyone who, can we stay a few minutes extra? I don't want to make anyone who has, you know, I know we have a lot of obligations. And so is it okay if we go an extra 10 minutes? Okay. I just want to be mindful of the time.
Perfect.
Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Fine.
I'm sorry? Okay.
It's okay to go an extra 10 minutes.
It's okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I broke down 3 different ways that you can actually start to try and utilize the approach of limit setting and boundaries. So one of the main things that we do here is when I say we, I'm speaking of the mental health specialists as we support the classrooms and the teachers with the children, is we constantly remind them to simplify the words and simplify what it is that you are asking. A child who is refusing to put on their coat, even though you've alerted them that you need them to put on their coat because it's time to go outside, an activity that they should enjoy and should be willing to go with the flow, may not necessarily be defiant in putting their coat because they just want to give you a hard time. It may be that there's something else going on that they need before they can put on their coat. Maybe they lost their mask. Maybe they forgot that they had a toy, and now because they're going outside, they're thinking about the toy and they don't know where that toy is going to be once they come back from the playground. So there's so many different elements that come into play with how a child is responding and why they are not wanting to follow the limits and the boundaries that are set. So a lot of our children who do not have the language to say, I am upset, or I am hungry, I am sleepy, will act upon it. And most parents very commonly know when their child is, he's cranky, although he doesn't want to go to sleep, he's so tired, but he's fighting that sleep. And now, can you please come on, let's go so we can get ready for bath time, and then we're going to read the book. So the more calm and the more interested you are in the activity that you want them to do next, it's going to play a big role in whether or not they buy into following. And then you can actually break it down and give them, children really do thrive on having a lot of clarity. So if you can give them, no, I don't want you to use this. Like for the example here, this is for mommy to use because, and then you give them a very simplified explanation. And then it goes right into number 2, which is where you're going to basically implement. Now you're going to not tell them, you're actually telling them that the item is for you and it's not for their use. And now you're gonna basically explain to them why it is not okay for them to use it or do it. And then that comes with usually an alternative where I don't want you to do this, but guess what? You can do this instead. Or you're not yet ready for this, but can we talk about why you're so interested? Or mommy doesn't want you to necessarily help right now because I need to finish this up. But later on, I need you to be my special helper with. Children are constantly craving our attention, adults' attention, because to them, we are very, very interesting. To them, our daily activities, even the most boring things that we do. Children of various ages, especially our little ones, they look at us in absolute awe because they are learning from us what life could be. And from their curiosity and their enthusiasm for life, they're constantly going to be asking why. So a lot of the times, not wanting to follow a limit setting comes with the child wanting to understand why. Once they understand why, then they're like, okay, I'll do that. Or if you give them, again, an empowering moment. So rather than you are going to do, you have a conversation. And the conversation should happen when the child is calm. It shouldn't be happening while the child is already having a full-blown meltdown and tantrum. Because we know through experience that when a child is having an explosive emotional reaction, the less we talk, the better it is, because we want to help them understand how to process that emotion. We want to value that emotion. We don't want to shame it. We don't want to minimalize it. Every emotion is important and it has a place and a time. So this is why this, as in correlation with establishing routines and parental care, having these conversations while you are connecting with your child, while you're having dinner, having a conversation about what your limits are and what the boundaries are and how that child feels about those limits and boundaries. And of course, you do a lot of this through observation. Excuse me. You will be doing this a lot through observation and guessing while the child is younger, because there is a lack of language there. But as you model what your expectations are, your child is always paying attention to what you are doing to follow your lead. And of course, as they become more and more mature, they become more and more independent. And that's where you start seeing a little bit more questioning, a little bit more challenging. And it's not because I don't want to follow you and I don't respect you. It's just simply, I have my own mind and I have questions and I have my own way of perceiving this. Can you help me see it from your perspective? Or can you help me understand why you do this? I always tell my mother, when I think back to a lot of the limit settings that she used to give me, now that I'm much older, of course, I can look back on it and appreciate the many, many different ways that she helped me not only understand what was safe and what wasn't safe, but also the fact that I was able to ask those questions. I was able to not only say, I don't want to do it and get very defiant, and even in my behavior, be very defiant, but I always knew that there was an open time when I was going to get the clarity that I was craving. And that has also helped me with dealing with a lot of limits and boundaries that we ourselves have to follow as adults. So it really does set the child up for it's an easier way for the child to follow changes and follow challenges. And life is full of both challenges and changes. And then of course you have all of the fun in between. But if those two areas fall apart, usually then we see a falling apart on a whole social emotional level for the child. And so these skills are really critical to learn them. The earlier, the better, because life is only going to get much more detailed and a little more complex moving forward. So your child, once they're learning these at our Head Start level, when they're in kindergarten and even third and fourth grade, now you start seeing the results of how these skills are being applied in their everyday. So it could be an example of, oh, my child really had a hard time coming in the morning and sitting down with their classmates. And now my child comes in not only enthusiastic about wanting to sit down, but they're following the routines and the limits without adult guidance. So now they're gaining independence, and they're gaining control, and they're gaining confidence, which are all very critical in emotional stability. We know through mental health that a child cannot learn without having the foundation of their emotions stable. A child who has a chaotic emotional understanding has a much more challenging time processing academic information, which is one of the models we follow in Head Start. We do try to establish the social emotional is the foundational piece in the overall building blocks. So we start, where is the child emotionally? Is the child stable? Is the child calm? Is the child able to understand limits and boundaries? Is the child following routines? And then we build upon that, which is the same thing for all of us. We know that in the history of calming down, no one has calmed down when you tell them to calm down. And as adults, we can actually see whether or not we learned those behaviors that we needed at a certain time, but it becomes a little more challenging to learn it later on. So it's actually, you're not only giving your children tools and skills that are going to help them in the moment, but you're actually preparing them for a much successful life journey, because they're not going to have such a hard time adjusting to changes and challenges later on. And then again, like I said, when you're setting those limits and boundaries, especially with our younger ones, the younger ones respond very openly to this. The older ones start asking a little more questions, which can get very interesting. But if I'm asking you to stop this, I would like you to do this instead. And that gives an option, and it gives a choice, and it's again empowering the child, because I'm more than certain you've heard of the power struggle that can come with a toddler. And I personally know that they win 100% of the time. So we do not engage in power struggles with our young little ones, because when they are in a mental state of refusal, they're not going to hear what it is that we are wanting from them. Give me 1 second. Dawn, were you just trying to reach me? Oh. So I'm not sure how much time do we have. Okay, so I gave, just like I summarized for limits and for routines and schedules, I gave you a breakdown of what a daily schedule looks like. And these are generalized tips for how to set limits. And again, these are very concrete, but again, I want you to keep in mind that each one comes with its own subcategory. So keeping your cool can have sub A, B, C, D, and D. What does that look like for you? What does keeping it calm look like for you? And then you build from there. Then what are your guidelines? And what exactly is your reasoning for having those limits and boundaries? Because if you have that understanding, then when your child is actually showing any kind of behavior or any kind of challenge to following you, you can always utilize that in conversation to help them understand. Because again, the more confident you are in the decision that you're making, your child is going to feel that, and they're going to respond to you accordingly. Being consistent, we say it all the time. Consistency, keeping it simple, repeating. It can, and we do understand it is frustrating, and it can be very, very overwhelming, especially when you have children of different needs and or special needs. But the consistency is also going to give the child, again, the stability and the expectation that they are looking for. When you ask them to do something today, but then tomorrow it's okay to do what you just said not to do yesterday, you're actually sending mixed messages. And the child is going to then draw their own conclusions from those mixed messages. So in the lack of consistency and in the lack of repetition, your child is actually, in a certain way, challenging you to see how much you are really comfortable in putting this routine and this boundary. If you don't know that this is going to work, then why should I follow it? Literally. So if you are having a problem with the consistency and with repeating it because of your household environment or because of stressors and life, again, this is where we come in, mental health specialists, to help you break that down. And then you're also going to learn how to recognize what triggers your child and what triggers you. Because while you're setting the limit, your child is responding. Your child may be having a tantrum, but you are also having a tantrum because of their tantrum. So it, again, like I said from the very beginning, we all understand that parenting is not a one-way process. It's definitely a full circle. As the child is learning from the parent is learning from the child, and it's a continuous cycle. So you're not only going to recognize their triggers, you're going to recognize your triggers. And then more importantly, is to really learn as a part of your own parental self-care, how you respond to those triggers and what you are willing to do to minimize those triggers. And what you are then going to do to deal with those triggers. Because again, going in the direction of parental self-care, your child has a tantrum because they literally did not like that you told them that they needed to stop watching TV because it's time to go to bed. And you now had to sit and watch them cry for 5-10 minutes before they then agreed to go upstairs and take a bath. After they calm down, you still have to deal with your emotions. You still have to deal with how you feel about that experience. And the more aware and the more willing you are to actually go in and actually recognize what those triggers are, you're going to recognize when you need a break, what your break looks like, and what other type of strategies and techniques you may actually need to better care for yourself. Because again, you can't parent if you're not meeting your own self-care. Again, you're punishing the behavior, not the child. This is very critical because we don't want to over-identify the behavior with the child's personality. The child broke a vase. The child is not a bad child. I don't know if that helps to make it a little easier. The child is screaming. The child is not necessarily defiant. We are looking at the behavior, at the isolated behavior. We're looking at it in the moment rather than making it a judgment or making it a identification with the personality and the actual characteristics of that child. And once your child understands that that is not what's happening, they become a little more flexible and a little less defensive about wanting to comply with whatever limit settings you're giving them. And again, because of the repetitions and keeping it simple, the follow through and the positive language are key components in how children respond. That's pretty much the end of my presentation there. I hope, I know I went exactly 9 minutes over.
So Gloria, I still have to do my part quick. Just
yes.
Okay. So guys, parents, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time. I know we've gone a little bit over. Each time we do one of these workshops, we just try to share a little snippet on self-care. I'm not sure if any of you were on the last call. We did talk a little bit about self-care. And those, the PowerPoint and the presentation are available on our Facebook page. Also, your site manager should have emailed that out to you. So if you did not get that and you're interested in that, please let your site manager know or your mental health specialist so we can get that out to you. I'm just going to share something really quick. Let's see. So Gloria, did you unshare your screen?
Pause share.
Gloria?
That's all am I frozen? Can you hear me?
Lost Gloria. Can everyone hear me?
Oh, I'm here.
What happened here?
Yes. I can hear y'all.
You can hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what
paused
happened.
it. I paused my screen share. Can you hear me?
You got to stop recording.
I've lost.
Sorry.
Stop share.
There you go.
There we go.
I'm not muted. I don't know why it's.
Dawn, can you hear me? No?
I don't know what happened.
I can hear you, Dawn.
Yeah, we can hear you.
This is.
You can't hear us?
Can't hear me?
We hear
Yeah,
you.
we hear you. Yes.
I don't know. I
We
can't
hear
hear
you.
you guys. Let me. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what happened. I'm so sorry. Gloria, did you unshare your screen? Because it's saying only one.
Yes.
It won't let me share the screen.
I stopped sharing. Everything is off on my end.
I don't know why. Ugh. Okay. Here we go.
Please bear with us. The joys of
I
technology.
know. So what I wanted to share really quick is when we talk about self-care, and again, I'm racing through this. It's kind of like, what's the point of doing self-care? Why do we do self-care? So I just wanted to talk really quickly about the nervous system and how that works. So within our bodies, we have what's called the autonomic nervous system, and we have two branches. One is called the sympathetic, which is pictured here, and then we have a parasympathetic nervous system. And so what happens is when we kind of have stress or we go into fight or flight, which I think a lot of us have heard of, our body goes into the sympathetic mode, which is what is pictured here. It's a silly little picture, but it kind of shows you what happens when you have an emergency or you're running to catch the bus or something happens with your child and you go to run after them, or just simple repeated stress over and over. Our body kind of goes into the sympathetic mode. And again, this will be part of a packet that we'll send out with some other tips on self-care. And also you'll have the presentation from today, and it will be a recording that will get posted. But you can see from the picture that what happens when we go into sympathetic mode is that the body is preparing to deal with an emergency. So our heartbeat speeds up. You can see here our blood pressure goes up. The energy that was going to digest our food and kind of relax us goes into our big muscles so that we can react to the emergency that's happening. Our muscles get tense. Also, chemicals are getting pumped out that help our body to react. And a lot of the times when we are continuing to pump those adrenals, that they're called, we get exhausted because those adrenal chemicals are not supposed to be pumping all the time. They're just supposed to be pumping for short spurts when we need them. So again, you'll get this visual in an email, but this is what it looks like when our body is in a sympathetic or stressed mode. So one of the reasons that we implement self-care is so that our body can go into, another silly picture, what we call the parasympathetic mode. And you can see that when our body, after an emergency is over, our body goes into parasympathetic and it relaxes. Our breath slows back down. Our digestion goes back, right? And we're not as tired. So one of the reasons that we practice self-care is because we don't want to be in a stressed mode, right? One of the things that Gloria is talking about is having an easier day, having these schedule. So when we talk about self-care, it's a pretty broad topic, right? It's things we can do personally. It's things that we do for our children to kind of make our day go easier. Life is stressful, especially with the world that we live in now. So we want to implement things that can help kick in this parasympathetic mode. So sometimes when you think about it that way, all these things that we're doing are to help kind of calm our body, right? So we'll send out some packets. You can look on. I don't want to keep us any longer. And one quick thing I will just plug right away is if you go onto YouTube, because it seems like everyone here now is on their phone, and you just type in meditation, relaxation, there are tons of free things. Quick 5-minute little meditations, relaxing music. Implementing something as simple as that can really kick in your parasympathetic. So that's my little quick blurb for today. Again, we'll have another workshop next month, and we'll talk about another little aspect about self-care. Miss Edie has her hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say, I just want to thank my parents from Classroom D and F for attending this workshop, especially one of them is on vacation. And she took time out of her vacation to attend this workshop. So I'd just like to thank them.
Yes, thanks everyone. Thank you to everyone for being here today.
Yes. So thank you. It's the
Thank
information.
Thank all the parents for attending.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you all for taking your time. And again, if you have any specific questions or any particular issues that you are dealing with, especially if it's getting to the point where it's becoming stressful, please reach out to your mental health specialist. If you are not aware of who your mental health specialist is, please ask your site managers when you do drop off or pick up your children, they have our names, they have our information, so that is an open line of communication that you can start with us. Because again, we do monitor certain children, but we don't know unless you tell us that you need our specific help or our specific guidance in any particular way.
Any questions before we go from anyone? Okay, well, again, this will all be posted. You'll get an email. It'll be on the website. So thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Yes,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.